Hello, good morning. Welcome to Shambles Stay at Home Festival with me and with Josie. Hello, Josie.
Hello, Robin. How are you?
I'm very good. Are we going to have some of the, because yesterday's yawning was magnificent. There's been a lot of feedback on the really tight close-up yawns after you had a battle with adrenaline, didn't you, overnight? And there was we've had a lot of dentists very interested in the formation of your teeth.
Well, they're a particularly unusual type of teeth because I should have had braces, but the dentist didn't think I was committed enough to them, so I didn't have them. And now I think the dentist should have just put the braces on. But there we go. That's Orpington in 1993.
Yeah, but I didn't have braces till I was like 46 years old. And the one thing that I did learn was when you can't have a little drink of water and then continue talking because they act as troughs. So already the front row, from the amount of spittle that comes out in a kind of Steve Winwood style from me, the arc of my spittle, right? Already it's quite a lot. If I also add a trough of water, it's a disaster.
Oh, that's like a thrill ride.
Yeah, it was. It was I was the Alton Towers of the front row of the Lamb Inn, Eastbourne. Very much.
I've often said it. How are you?
I'm very good. I've started today. I've been watching some fascinating. I've been doing a lot of interviews for the book. In fact, one that I will talk about with Rachel and Marcus, our guests today. Just so you know, it's International Jazz Day. It's not, but it is here. We've got Rachel Parris, Marcus Brigstocke, and we've also got Steve Pretty joining us, and he's going to play us something that he worked on with Chris Lintott. But I talked to someone called Susan Strong, and I'll talk to Marcus about it because Marcus I know is a huge fan of Prince, and she was the engineer on a lot of Prince's big recordings. Wow. And she was talking about the stories about Prince, which are absolutely beautiful and fascinating, and about music obsession as well. So anyway, I've been doing all these book interviews, but the one that I'm doing today is with a guy called Adrian Owen, who I met in Toronto, and he deals with in terms of kind of a neuroscientist, looking at consciousness, looking at it from a very kind of pragmatic view with people with vegetative state, and he's found out there's various people that have been in fMRIs and they've realized that they still have quite active brains, they still have self-conscious self-awareness, and the work that's been done in terms of getting those people back to having some form of active and interactive life. So that's how I started my day, and he's brilliant, and I really recommend Adrian Owen. Look up some of the talks he's done.
The opposite of the chimp cannibalism yesterday.
Chimp cannibalism was a disaster, right? I love Jane Goodall. On my list, I sent an email to someone who knows Jane Goodall, going, please be interviewed for my book, Jane Goodall. I really am fascinated in your work and chimpanzees and everything. But yeah, starting the day reading about the brutality of the two female chimpanzees who went up to another mother and would just continually kill and eat her babies.
You don't need to go into all the details.
Just remember.
A comparison.
Just remember, if you're ever going through some nostalgia loop and you're watching old PG Tips adverts and you go, hang on a minute, I thought there were two grown chimpanzees and a baby chimpanzee pushing up the piano. Yeah, halfway up the stairs, the baby chimpanzee was eaten.
What they do with them is they put peanut butter on their teeth and it looks like they're talking. And that's what they also do with Boris Johnson.
Hey! What is your show and tell today?
So, we got given by one of our upstairs neighbours some copies of these, which I just hadn't thought my daughter was old enough for yet, so I hadn't thought to investigate.
Well, they are racing Meghan Mogg.
They're so incredible.
They used to have a Simon Bates introduction whenever you rent or buy a Meghan Mogg book. You have to be certain about the contents.
But they're so beautiful and playful, and they really sort of remind me of like Channel 4 showing animation from Eastern Europe when I was a kid. And I found those, and then I dug this out because we were talking to Martin Rowson yesterday, and I rather playfully, because I was reading these to my daughter, and I went, oh, do you want me to read this one? And she was like, no, not that one. Like she knew. And she really, I don't know what on YouTube has got to her, but already
they do say
rather be opposed to Marxism.
The Marxist gene, from current research, it has been found out it can skip a generation. In fact, especially oddly enough, if both the mother and the father have the Marxism gene, that very often leads to the development of a capitalism gene.
Very sad. But at the same time, good for us when she chooses the home that we get put in. So that's in a way, isn't it?
Not really, because she'll be going, oh, hang on a minute. Well, that one said, I've looked there at the cost. The cost of love, I'm afraid, Mother and Father, is too great, and it will affect my ivory back scratcher. I have Observer, a copy of the Observer, because I love these. I can't remember if I've pulled these out before, but I have always been obsessed with old colour supplement magazines from when I first, like when I was quite young, and when
Snapshot, isn't it?
Was years ago. And this I've got because I've got a few with Don McCullen's brilliant photographs.
Oh wow!
Don McCullen, of course, is generally best known for photographs of kind of war and of also Ireland in the 1970s and things like that. And this I just love because this is one of it's just a boy having fun in the fairground, and it's just kind of a reminder of his ability in so many, but also because it's International Jazz Day. One of the main reason I think that I love these magazines is for the adverts. And International Jazz Day, here is an advert for Bry Nylon showing that it goes well with jazz. I hope you can see that. Bry Nylon is very much a swinging ticket. That's what it is. Bry Nylon is a swinging ticket. Swinging ticket, subtle sweater solo by Shah Cleod with the swinging accompaniment of carefree Bry Nylon. How to get in on the act? Look for the Bry Nylon label and you're sure to hit the top fashion note. Do-do-do-do-do. Jazz. There we are. So that's my show and tell. And shall we meet?
Yes.
Welcome to their front room. It is Rachel Parris and Marcus Brigstocke. Good morning.
Hello.
Hello.
We've been really laughing, and we were like, "Are we on mute? Are they going to hear us laughing?"
Weirdly enough, of course, as comedians, that's what goes through our head when we're performing. They on mute because I'm just not sure it's going down that well.
That's what will happen when we're all gigging live again. If you're dying, you can just be like, nah. It's a shame they were muted, but
yeah, the Skype connection with my live audience was very, very weak. So I want to ask you two first of all about jazz, which I'd not known. I mean, certainly with you, Marcus, I've known about a lot of your kind of different, musical obsessions, and we've spent time at festivals and been to see all manner of different acts. But jazz, when did that become part? Has it always been something you've been interested in?
No, I had a go at it. I was sort of properly into it for a little while, in my early 20s, and then I sort of started trying to listen to records that were just too difficult, and telling everyone I was listening to them. Like even at that time, The Birth of the Cool by Miles Davis, because what a great title for an album. And I'd tell people, yeah, I listened to The Birth of the Cool, but I hated it. I really hated the music. It was awful. And Bitches Brew, still, I have a good go at Bitches Brew a couple of times a year. And I'd say 1 in 4, I listen to the whole thing and go, oh, that was really great. Mostly I'm like, oh, this is exhausting. It's like being beaten up. So it probably kicked in about 7 years ago, and then got really, really, really obsessive. But part of the joy of it for me is finding something where there are loads of limits, even with a single artist, where you're like, oh no, this bit's awful. Like John Coltrane went mad. I mean,
those are the bits that I like. I think, as someone who's reasonably obstreperous as Stuart Lee, but reasonably obstreperous, I quite like it when there is a level of discordancy, where there is a level of I don't really know what they thought they were doing, but it seems to be alienating enough people for me to be drawn to. There is that kind of
something in this. I was in a record shop in Edinburgh a few years ago, and it was one of the sort of maybe a week into the festival or something, and I was going through some jazz vinyl, and from behind me I heard, yeah, we danced to that record in Club Zarathustra a few years ago. And it was Stuart. And then he just sort of, that's all he said, and then walked off. And I wasn't sure whether it was like thumbs up for that record or whether he was going, yeah, because we all knew it was stupid.
When I did a tour, when I was supporting Stuart on tour so long ago, when I was 22, we were in the car and we would play things like Bob Dylan or The Specials, or things that we both really love. And then he got this big bunch of CDs at that time of like John Zorn and the new John Zorn experimental side project, and we were driving down the motorway, and it was really like silence and then just like and then he just sort of turned to me and went, we can turn this off if you hate it. And I was really like, no, I love it. It's wonderful.
It's very
Yeah,
sweet.
I think it's
good.
Yes, exactly. I love this. This is absolutely.
But that's the thing. I mean, Rachel, you must, as a musician, do you? I mean, the way that you kind of interact with music, is there something a bit like if you've been a comic for too long, there are certain bits of comedy which can no longer work for you because the mechanism is too apparent. And I wonder whether you've ever found that with certain music where you sometimes, I loved that as a kid, and you go, now I know how that works.
Well, I get that with like really sort of basic pop music, but not ever with like quite traditional jazz, because my jazz tastes are very trad. They're like the Great American Songbook, Sammy Cahn, Harold Arlen, Gershwin, Cole Porter, like, and a lot of it's vocal because I grew up like in a house that didn't really play music, so the music I knew was the music I played on the piano, and so I got bought like all the songbooks of all of those people, and I learned all the songs. So still they're the first things that come to me when I play and sing. And I never really got into other instrumental stuff because I couldn't play the trumpet or the trombone. I just could do what I could sing and play. But those tastes, and then I only when I started, buying CDs, then bought like all the Ella Fitzgeralds, all of the Louis Armstrongs and all of that. So those tastes have kind of stayed the same, but then luckily they're very compatible.
Yeah, it's good crossover
with our taste. So now, like in the house, we play a lot of the sort of, is it like bebop? Is that the word?
Yeah,
that kind of like is it 50s era?
Yeah,
is the era that I like. But no, I don't. I recognise how the structure of the songs, I suppose, but it doesn't make me like them any less.
But
really nice.
being in the house with someone who can sit at the piano and go, oh yeah, here's a Horace Silver tune or a version of, or here's some Gershwin or Cole Porter, and just be able to play it is literally like blows my mind.
Yeah,
because you're not musical, are you, Marcus? I mean, I know you can sing and you can carry tunes and stuff like that, but you don't, because you're not someone who can play an instrument, are you?
Well, I'm learning the trumpet now. And
this is not the time to do it. If you live in a terraced house during isolation and your neighbours,
that is a cruel present for your neighbours.
Yeah. guys, I've worked out one more note in this scale.
I think the trumpet is one of the most satisfying instruments to learn, because you can make enough progress so that you can make notes in a relatively short period of time, and it's so satisfying. It's I spent a summer learning the trumpet before university, and I didn't get that far, but I was it's the most devoted and in love with practice I've ever been in my life. Yeah. Because like every day I was like, maybe I can make a C now. Really good.
And it does make such a difference. If you play every day, even for a couple of weeks, it makes a massive, massive difference. But my teacher's been brilliant, because I did say to him, but they don't always they're not always able to deliver. But I said to him, I'd rather play music that I really love very badly than music that I don't like or care about sort of well, even if that's sort of a better way to learn. So I try to play things like My Funny Valentine and Send in the Clowns and stuff like that. And
it sounds nice.
Yes. So it kind of, I can get there with some of that stuff, and I love that. And even like we played the head of a few tunes from Kind of Blue, and just like even if it's just the first 3 bars, it's still like, oh my God, I'm playing that, and that delights me in a way that it's just wonderful. I love it.
Also, it's good because if you two as a duo, so if you want to do a really long solo, Rachel, it does look quite cool when a trumpeter's just fiddling with it. They're not actually playing; they're fiddling it with an angle.
Just holding.
Still a certain. Whereas an impatient piano player just sat there. It's much harder to fiddle with the piano and look like it's kind of it's messier. It's much messier. Do you have is there a shaded area where you two cannot find shared musical taste? I mean, there's
plenty. I would say a lot. I'd say quite quite a bit of the classical music I like, you find quite
Hang on, what like?
Quite boring.
The stuff with no beat. I'm a complete just cave dweller when it comes to classical music.
There is a beat, they're just not banging it out on a drum.
I need to be really handheld and guided through classical music, and so like it has worked a bit, hasn't it? But sometimes if you've sort of introduced me to something and then I really listen, I'm like, that's beautiful, I can hear that's extraordinary or interesting, and it makes me see things. But if classical music is on sort of incidentally, I'll always ask you, like, so who's this? What's this one? And then I sort of need a hook to get into it. And it's funny, I did grow up with lots of classical music at home. My parents are really into it, but it's a blind spot for me.
And I don't really like really heavy, like electronic dance anthems that you used to dance to in the 90s.
Amazing.
Is it the anthem or is it the silver shorts he wears? Because sometimes the two can...
It's Sophie's choice, isn't it? It's neither are great.
It's funny that, because like there are some tunes that I like from the early 90s that, for me it does so much. It takes me on a journey and lots of memories and makes me want to dance and all the rest of it. But when someone quite rightly says, this is just the same for 6 minutes, this is just the same, then you go, oh yeah. Yeah. The only thing that's making this interesting is me imposing my own memories of having been at a club or a festival or whatever over the top of just a repeated
doing sober
beat.
Raving.
Sober raving. That's the way.
What
That's the way.
I think with things like that are really, because I don't like it when people treat classical music like it's wallpaper. Like I absolutely hate just sort of people just having something on like in a lift or I don't know, like.
Most boring is when people do that with it.
But with like dance, like house music, amazing. Put it on as wallpaper, I will get some work done. Like the only music that I'm like, great, you occupy a tiny part of my brain, I'll get the rest done. Thank you.
Yeah.
See, I can't do dance music generally. I enjoy it if it's not been made to dance.
Robin, you're not a big raver, Robin.
No, I know, and it's weird because if you look at my collection of luminous whistles, you'd think I was. But it is.
What were you like when you were like 19, 20 before we knew each other? Did you go out a lot?
The same. He was the same as this.
I did. I was never someone who liked crowds, which you'll see from why I've taken my career in the direction I have. But I would go to places like Feet First at Camden Palace on a Tuesday night where they would play Dinosaur Jr. and Happy Mondays. So I like dance music when it was. I'd like the kind of Manchester dance music. I love things like Massive Attack, Orbital. I love all of the kind of James Lavelle, Mo Wax stuff, but it's the bit when it just there's a point where it seems only there to dance to, and I go, there's not enough going on. And I do, and that thing you were saying, Marcus, I need too many extraneous bangs and samples and oddities because otherwise my mind wanders. I think
Robin, did you have the section like when you were sort of late teens, early 20s, and maybe going to parties of friends and stuff like that, where generally speaking the same music got played? For me, there was a 3 or if we were lucky 4 song section where they would play Should I Stay or Should I Go, then Love Cats, Tainted Love by Soft Cell, and if you were really lucky, one other acceptable,
like Close to Me by The Cure.
Yeah, maybe something like that you'd like. These I will dance to, but I won't smile, and then I'll go back to where I was and rock backwards and forwards over.
Exactly the same. And it's an odd thing now, looking back at something like Feet First, which was Jonathan and Eco, which was the kind of indie disco and the late 80s into the early 90s. That
I used to go to that when I was 14 years old. So I'd like to upbraid them on their terrible lax security. In retrospect, got away with it.
All 14.
But
I think I was neglected, to be honest. But
Mm.
Some would say you ran free, others would say you were neglected. There's two ways of
amok is what I was running.
But
they
used to you 18 when I first met you?
I probably would have been 17, I think.
17. Because I remember when I first met Josie and she was
were you performing at Glastonbury?
Yeah, I started when I was a teenager, basically. Yeah.
and forgive blushes here, right? But I mean, firstly, she was brilliant and so funny. But also, I remember talking to you and thinking, she's so clever and sophisticated, and like, because I was I really did.
Well, now you look at me and you think, what went wrong?
Yeah, what has happened?
Went wrong?
What has happened here? You seemed so happy at that Glastonbury. I wasn't a cool kid going to clubs when I was 14.
Well, I don't know whether it's cool, honestly. I mean, I really, really love, when I think about teenagers who are just very studious and content, I think that's much cooler, isn't it, than being...
Rachel.
Right? Yeah, I think it is very cool. Like, it's silly, isn't it? And ideas of cool change every 5 years anyway, so...
Have you seen
tell
Book
teenagers
Slam?
now. Pardon?
Have you seen Book Slam? It is Book Slam, isn't it?
Booksmart.
Do
you mean Booksmart?
The movie,
No, I
yeah,
actually haven't. Partly because I'm like, you don't know me.
It has one mistake in it. It has. There's a little bit. There's one plot bit where I thought, nah, that's too much kind of papering over the cracks. But it's a lovely film because it's basically about the two really, really smart girls, and they're going to go to the really great colleges, and all the other girls and the boys, they've all wasted their time. But it turns out all the other ones have been having a great time and partying, but are also going to Harvard. And it's kind of it's really worth your time. I would say.
That really happened. Like at my school was I wasn't exactly like one of the ones that people thought, oh, you'll go to Oxbridge or anything like that. But definitely there was like, it was awful. We were awful people. There was a girl who was one of the cool gang. Or the mafia, as we used to call them, and she was very thin and pretty, and she was literally a model. She was the only girl who was literally a model at 18.
There's always a person at school who's a model.
Yeah, exactly. And all the other girls hate her apart from the cool gang. And she got like, there weren't A stars at A level then, obviously. So she got 5 A's, and our group was like, what the fuck now? Well, oh, sorry, don't swear this early in the morning.
But like, it's too late now.
Oh, fine. But yeah, we were like so horribly surprised.
In a 2-year window, she got 5 A's at A level.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people at that time took 5 A levels. Yeah.
And just that film Booksmart so covers that like horrible judgmental thing about like who's meant to do well and be studious and who's not, and that actually sometimes the cool girls are clever as well.
But also, I think it's about what you cling to, because you sort of go, I've got this thing, I don't have that thing, but I've got this thing.
Life, but I'll probably do quite well at A levels. So we were like, oh my God, you're a model and you're cool and you've got a boyfriend and you're doing well academically.
Oh, and she's got a boyfriend. And the boyfriend's got a car.
Yeah.
That bit in I'm thinking of the LCD Sound System song "Losing My Edge," where he goes, "I'm losing my edge," and all these people are coming up behind, and then and he goes, and they're actually, I mean, they're really great people. They're really talented. Good for them, And it's like that. It's like, to be honest, come on. And what's she doing now? Have you ever been tempted to Google her?
No, actually, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it now.
That's a scene from Community, isn't it? Was it Community where he's looking people up?
Who?
Someone was looking people up. What did we watch? We watched something the other day, and someone was looking people up to see that they'd failed.
God.
Good. Yes. Oh no, it was we started rewatching Green Wing. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Rewatching Green Wing, and in the first episode of that, one of the young doctors is looking people up who were really successful and cool at school, going, good, and now I'm a doctor.
Just quickly mention, by the way, because we haven't mentioned it today, there is a tip jar somewhere on. We're probably at the bottom of the screen, and we are collecting money for people in the arts industry who have kind of been hitting the wall and having a lot of having financial problems, just trying to keep them afloat. And also we've been giving money to, so far it's 5 different art centres been able to give some donations to, so that they can keep being funded and will basically actually be able to pay themselves a wage and keep going.
6 art centres.
6 art centres. I thought we'd given to Caution Pound Art Centre twice. We've only given to them once. So yes,
they first 5 already, but a 6th one has thrown itself.
Trent's own art centre that he set up. This Jude,
Burton Arts Centre of Prestige.
Without wishing to drag things down, reading that the Arctrix Art Centre in Bromsgrove is not going to make it through this was probably the sort of biggest thing for me. Like, it really hit me like a truck. I was like, oh no, that's just awful. And it's, there's one place, obviously there will be absolutely loads, but I don't know, maybe it's a place I've had particularly good gigs in, but just thinking, oh no, these places are so important.
Also, so I started stand-up when I was 14. I was able to kind of start was because in Beckenham at that time there was an art centre called the Studio, and it was basically the only art centre in the whole of Bromley. There's a commercial theatre in Bromley, but in the whole of the borough of Bromley, it's the only art centre, and it was the only place that did kind of courses like that. And obviously, like, that's what meant I was introduced to stand-up comedy, did stand-up comedy, did like improv, did loads of stuff like that. And then obviously then that got sold off by the Conservative Council. No, really? Yeah. What? But I think, can you believe?
Deal or something.
Yeah, exactly. It must have been with thoughts. No, but they so now that just isn't there. That whole community doesn't have any chance to do anything like that except the odd things commercially or in libraries and stuff. And it's so meaningful in terms of like a hub and a lighthouse for people,
Yeah, for us, the just up the road, the Omnibus Theatre was sort of, it came, actually, it was a library, and they were closing the library. They'd sold it off, and these people sort of leapt in and went, no, hang on, this should be a space for public use. And now it's actually, there are 4 performance and rehearsal spaces in there. And I mean, they're really, really struggling as well now, obviously, but they do tons of stuff, with youth theatre groups, new writing and all the rest of it. So, I just hope they're all okay. Well, I've sort of been in touch. They're still there for now, so fingers crossed.
Well, all the art centres we get are the kind of art centres which do make sure that it is something for the community as well. And there's a lot of things that go on there, and local artists and all of that kind of thing. I know people, again, we've talked about this before, that it's a luxury, etc. in one way, but actually the people who we're trying to get money to, it's their job, it's what they do, and they spend an enormous amount of time to it, and we're trying to make sure that they don't become unemployed. That's one of the things that it's about, and places like the Rondo where Ian who runs that, they make sure there's new plays and new writers and new people being drawn through all the time. So it's anyway, that's
also, if we're not keeping art alive, what are we doing it all for, huh? That's what they say.
You know what? Both those sound effects showed the influence that Marcus and Rachel's jazz has had on you already. I've never seen it.
Do you do that, Marcus? That's what I used to have to do to practice my embouchure.
Yeah, a lot of this.
Like you're smoking.
Yeah, cool.
That looks a bit like a sort of medieval giving the finger.
Yes, of course, like that would be a gesture. They
make even now like a French diss.
Rachel, I haven't even asked you yet about the fact that you and Carrie are doing the Pride and Prejudice watch along.
Yeah.
I
so fun.
Ignored Pride and Prejudice due to prejudices from school, basically, where a certain clique, I was like, it's basic, I would never ever touch it. And then I watched the Joe Wright adaptation, and I loved it so much. I watched it like 3 times in a week.
That's a good adaptation. I don't like, cause it's not my favourite adaptation, but that's probably because I already loved it. So I was like, stop messing with it.
You're like, that isn't the right person, and that's not the right person.
Yeah. Keira Knightley is not the right one, and why is Darcy that person? But actually, I think coming back to it now, I think I'd really like that adaptation, not least because Matthew McFadden is now so amazing in everything.
I've been on a Matthew McFadden completist trip the past month, where I've just been watching everything I can find, being like, yes, well, I really see, yes.
Yeah.
But I've had that as well. Like, since Succession, I've had a complete rethink on him, because he was definitely, an actor. You go, oh yeah, he's always.
I saw him in Spooks.
He's always solid. Yeah, he's all right. And now you're like, Matthew Fat. Amazing. We just watched something with him the other day.
The quiz show.
Oh,
Yeah. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Yeah, he was
loved
great.
it. And also, Robin, have you seen this yet? Quiz. We were talking about it the other week. Basically, you go into it going, I know this story. They cheated and they got caught. And you leave it going, they're innocent. How dare they? How dare this world?
I left concluding they were probably innocent, or at the very least so bad at it that they shouldn't be punished.
But I thought they were definitely guilty, but that's because I'd previously watched the documentary about it. But now I found out through that programme that the documentary was made by ITV with a lot of prejudice. So now I'm like, who knows?
Also, I found out that the Major is quite like anti-Tory, and I was really like, he's a great man. He deserves his £1 million. Leave him alone. Leave him alone. Yeah, on Twitter, he's got a Twitter, and he's fun.
Back off him. He's no Carol Baskin.
That is not what you'd expect.
We will. We'll be back with you shortly. We'll be back with you shortly, but we're going to go because it's International Jazz Day here. I think we are going to join Steve Pretty, who many of you will have seen before. He's regularly, as well as doing his own amazing work with Hackney Colliery Band and others. He also does incredible arrangements every year when we do our shows at the Hammersmith Apollo. And we were mentioning Love Cats. One of my better bad ideas was to say to Robert Smith, why don't you do an Umpar version of Love Cats with Brian Cox on the piano? And you were musical director of that, weren't you, Steve?
I was, yeah. That was amazing. That was amazing. Incredible / weird opportunity to do that. It was really special doing that with Brian and Robert. Yeah. I'm not sure Umpar's quite right. I suppose it almost was, wasn't it? There's a little bit of Umpar about it.
Yeah, I think it umparred. It umparred more than the Cure normally umpar. It was definitely an umpar in terms of... It's 50%
more umpar than normal.
Steve, I really, really like your setup, your studio setup.
I tell you what, in this lockdown, I've mainly been counting my lucky stars about how, if this had happened last year, we would have been in such a worse position. My son... Our second child has just turned 1, so he would have been born right over this. And this is in my garden, this sort of shed, and it was being built this time last year. So I wouldn't have had this, and with the garden site, the garden would have been a building site, so we wouldn't really have been able to use the garden. And I mean, we're just so lucky in so many ways that, especially that I'm able to kind of escape here for a few hours a day.
Wow, good.
So, what is this in terms of this is your jazz studio, the Studio Jazz, and are you at the moment going, because obviously you normally have an incredible workload and a live schedule. Now that's done. Are you delving into John Zorn like experimentation? Are we seeing a Stuart Lee free jazz revival?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's funny. I'm actually not playing the trumpet that much. I'm trying to do a lot of practice on other. I've always had. My piano playing's always been pretty shonky and just barely enough to kind of get by for arranging and composing. So I've been pretty religiously coming out here every morning. I've sort of flipped my day round from being a late night person to getting up and being in here at 6 a.m. every day and doing, trying to be a bit dedicated and doing a bit of practice, because otherwise, the day with 2 kids and it sort of can be a bit hectic. So I've been doing a bit of that and a bit of drumming, trying to sort of learn some new skills and take that chance. But I've started this podcast, which I've been sort of putting off for ages. So it's this lockdown is now a bit more lockdown themed than it was supposed to be, but it's based around some of the stuff I've done with you, Robin, in your shows, the Origin of the Pieces stuff, sort of teaching people about music and using stuff in their house to kind of show them how music works and stuff. So it's been really fun doing that. But as a result, I pick up the trumpet for about 20 minutes a day, and that's about it at the moment, which is. In a way, it's quite liberating, because as you're talking about earlier. Speaking of which, actually, and let me show off my buzz. Yeah, you're welcome. There you go, exactly. So there we are. So
you're not number 1 anymore, Josie. You were number 1.
Listen, I can do a trombone as well.
It's been quite liberating, because normally, although the trumpet is such a brilliant instrument, it's also quite punishing in terms of if you don't practice, and certainly with my work with Hackney Colliery Band, it's really intensive playing there, and very sort of high energy and loud and high and all the rest of it. So you really, normally I've got to do quite a lot of practice just to be able to get through a gig. It's a lot of endurance, that's needed for those gigs. And so actually not having to do sort of an hour a day of like long notes and kind of is actually quite welcome. So I've been sort of working through some, again, just sort of taking the opportunity to work through some other stuff. There's this massive tome that you talked about John Coltrane earlier, and there's this big tome which is a thesaurus of scales and melodic patterns, which John Coltrane famously sort of spent years going through and working. So I've been sort of trying to work my way through that and practicing through everything, which has been a bit challenging and a bit weird, probably more so for my neighbours. But
I was going to ask about that in terms of, do you feel that there is a book or a series of programs of things to listen to, or anything that gives a really good grounding in getting to know jazz and different types of jazz?
It's a really good question. There's been a few things. There was a Ken Burns documentary, which I haven't actually seen all of, but I've seen some of, that was out in the States about 10, 15 years ago. But the problem is, I think with that one, it's a bit controversial amongst of it, if you know a little bit more about it, if you know what I mean. So yeah, but I don't think you don't need to be fully immersed in it. I think sometimes read stuff about jazz and it's sort of assuming a level of knowledge that is really only speaking to other musicians, which is not very helpful. And so I think so the short answer is not that I can think of, really, because it's either aimed at musicians and is quite sort of nerdy and niche, or it's too general, like, hey, click your fingers, daddy-o, and it's like neither of those.
So what we've actually seen there is the classic jazz answer. The answer was no. You managed to riff on it for 3 minutes. It's highly impressive. I recommend before is But Beautiful, in terms of just about the live. Slightly fictionalised Jeff Dyer, the brilliant author Jeff Dyer. But Beautiful it certainly would draw you in. Even though it's not technical or anything like that. Steve, you are gonna hear some of the music you did with Chris. Yes, you've done a great show mixing up kind of music and astronomy.
Yeah, so Chris and I have been doing this show for a couple of years on and off, called Universe of Music, which is about the sort of it came about backstage at one of your gigs, Robin. We got to know each other through the Hammersmith gigs, I suppose, and turns out Chris is a big music fan but doesn't know anything about it, and I love astronomy but don't know anything about it, and so it was his suggestion that we sort of try and get together and make a bit of a show out of it. And so it's been really fun to do, and it's partly about the sort of interaction of the two, and it's partly about both of us just sort of chatting about our own fields and asking each other questions about how stuff works. And so but the bit of music I actually wrote, I did for my podcast, the House Music Podcast, which because I had Chris on as a guest last week, and I'm trying to kind of break down music in really elemental, in really elemental ways, and so talking about the real sort of basics, but from a kind of interesting perspective. So I had Chris on, and we were talking about this planetary system with these sort of harmonic orbits. So where for every 2 times one planet goes round, the the next planet goes around 3 times, and so on. So there's a guy called Matt Russo in Canada who has sort of sonified these, right? So it basically sounds a note every time this planet hits that, and then the next planet sounds a note every time it hits there. And so as a result, you get this. It's actually sort of really beautiful harmony emerging from this distant planetary system. And so I had Chris on sort of talking about this thing called the harmonic series, which is what really underlies the whole of notes and what music is, really our understanding of music. And so we were talking about this planetary system and how that relates to notes. And so I kind of knocked together this. It's basically a jam session with a planetary system, and it's very long, and it's essentially a jam. So it's kind of like an ambient piece, really, which is completely different from what I normally do. And so it's a bit formless, and it kind of drifts in and out. And I've made this slightly trippy video to go with it. But it's really fun to do, and actually I found it quite soothing thinking about, in the current context, just thinking about stuff that's so distant and so sort of abstract, but something so beautiful about 600 light years away, these planets going around in this kind of way that we can interpret as music. And so it's just my sort of response to that, I suppose.
Well, we're gonna watch that and listen to that at the end of the show. Sorry, Josie, you have something.
No, I was just going to say it's like interviews about cosmology.
Very much so, yeah.
Step back.
I count. Yeah, Infinite Monkey Cage is a very ambient experience. Steve, we will see you at the end of the show. And now we're just going to go back to Marcus and Rachel, and just remind you again about the tip jar at the bottom there, where we're building up a fund for people in the arts who kind of hitting the wall. And I wanted to ask you. I hope this isn't too much, but I know that. Near the beginning of this isolation period, in fact, we had a long conversation on that day, on that Sunday after the first week. Tim Taylor died, and I wanted, because both of you I know work with Tim, and you worked with him, not that long ago, and I wanted to talk about just the importance of Tim Taylor. And because I was this morning, I started the day before I went into dealing with the nature of consciousness. I did listen to an old episode of I'm Sorry, I'll Read That Again, and when you realise there are certain people who culturally, sometimes you almost don't notice how far that stick of rock, kind of runs through you in terms of all that. I'm Sorry, I'll Read That Again was the first thing that I surreptitiously used to listen to. It must have been repeated throughout our childhood. It was my mum's great big radio that I would take and listen under the nylon sheet, which of course is a tremendously dangerous thing to do in the late 1970s. It could have been a conflagration at any moment. But so I just wondered in terms of when you've worked with Tim, from both of you.
No, I mean, he's so sad. I mean, we did the last I'm Sorry, I Haven't a Clue with Tim, sort of when this was all starting, and then everyone was going, oh, should we, shouldn't we, and all the rest of it, and trying just to follow guidance. But he was so gleefully silly, I mean, just so amazingly silly, and he'd get this look in his eye when he knew he had something really puerile and usually pretty disgusting to drop on the audience. And even though he'd done it a million times before, they were still shocked and delighted every time he did it. Go, oh, I can't believe soft, small, elderly Tim Taylor just said something so.
He always did, and I like how much joy he got out of his own jokes.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, a Willy reference. What was it? Was it Todger?
Todger, yeah.
Yeah, there was. We were doing this sort of the work through for I'm Sorry, I Haven't a Clue. Sort of, who's going to do what in what round and stuff. And we were all like pitching joke ideas. And Tim said something about... I
can't remember what the setup was. But he just said, Todger?
My Todger or something. And he laughed for ages. While everyone else was going, I don't know, Tim, we probably might play in the room. And he was like... And then he got really defensive going, no, we're doing it. We're definitely doing it. It's very funny.
And then when we did it in the live show, the audience absolutely lost it.
Tim's Todger.
It's so funny.
So when I knew him a little bit, and then he came on as a guest on the first series of I've Never Seen Star Wars, where I'd get people to do stuff they'd never done before, and one of the things he said he'd never done is buy pornography. So what? He said, no, I've never bought pornography. And the idea I had was, go to a late night garage, like lots of shuffly men, and sort of have to buy some dog food to pretend you're not really there for a copy of Mayfair. But the producer sent him to like a full-on sex shop in Soho. It's not really what I'd expected anyway. But Tim went into this place with BBC recording equipment. So all of the other went, well, we're not having this, and we're out. So it was just him, and he picked up this magazine and took it to the till. And at which point the guy on the till said, do I recognise you? I think I know you. And Tim immediately went, Yes, I'm Bill Oddie. It was an absolute delight. So he was gleefully, joyfully funny, and it's so sad. And the work he made, especially with Graham with Graham Garden in all sorts of different capacities, it'll make us laugh for years to come. So. That's the aim, isn't it?
I think there is that thing that I don't know what it's not a trick. I mean, I think Graham Garden was right. That term, a class act, is such a beautiful way of summing up. But every time you almost forgot how funny and brilliant Tim was. There's something about just the look of him, the manner of him, that each time it came with so much more momentum, because, I mean, the speed of his mind, when I did a couple of shows with him in January, talking about the 1948 show, where, he'd just driven up from Worthing to Bristol to, and probably not had that much sleep, and just all the stories that came out, and the love of Marty Feldman and all of those things. It was absolutely wonderful. A class act. And, to mention a couple of other things that you're up to at the moment, something involving lip syncing, I believe, Marcus.
Yeah, this has been amazing. I mean, we were both poorly. We both had, we assume, C19. Don't know.
So who knows?
And then sort of started to feel better. The point at which I think we felt better was when we were playing music and jumping around a bit downstairs. And anyway. What did you do?
Trouble. To be fair, without any idea of ever putting it up anywhere, I did, for absolutely no reason, spend all of the last ostentatious tour last autumn learning the words to Trouble by Iggy Azalea. I think at the back of my head was, if you ever get invited on Lip Sync Battle, this is the song you'll do, because I'm not actually good at learning words. You are. But I find it really hard. So it took me about 8 weeks to learn the word for no reason last year to Iggy Azalea. So when I came, I think I put it on just to listen to, and I was like, Marcus, watch this, what's this? And then you went, put that up. Why not?
We've got nothing else.
Why not put it up online?
And then we just...
And that's it. That's how it all sort of kicked off.
And then we were on Good Morning America.
The American...
It was so fun.
Yeah.
HLN, Fox News, obviously we turned down, but
Fox. So we had these approaches from Good Morning America and various others, and then Fox sent 3 capitalized tweets to both of us.
I am trying to contact you. Where are you?
Be on now, like this. So we obviously brushed that off. But on Good Morning America with 5 or 6 lengthy Skype rehearsals and stuff. We're this is stupid. The whole thing is stupid. But I mean, it's really good fun. It's a daft fun thing for us to do.
It's genuinely quite psychologically good, because we until recently were taking it in turns to do one daily.
Yeah.
And it genuinely, we've got other little bits of work, but to have something regular to do.
But we had, I can tell you where it's got to. We spent 2.5 hours, I think, trying to get me dressed, painted as a robot, doing Intergalactic by the Beastie Boys. And 2.5 hours later, decided we couldn't release it because it wasn't good enough. That's where this has gone to, which I realise now, sharing that with other human beings, are we've gone a bit mad.
Yeah.
A bit mad.
You have.
Yeah, definitely. But they've been really...
That's a great thing, isn't it? This enormous junkyard of ambition, of where everyone has been limited to their front room, that when this is over, and this enormous archive of this seems to be the right thing to do while going through this particular kind of monkish period of our life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So whatever you land on arbitrarily as your thing that you're putting out takes on enormous importance, and you attach random values to it of this is good enough and this is.
Well, this track that we hear today is exactly like that. It's not at all the sort of stuff I normally do, but I just sort of thought, why not? Let's have a jam with the planetary system and get a bit trippy,
Just feel good opportunity to do something different to what you normally do.
Yeah, because you're not sort of chasing the next gig or show or whatever. You can kind of go, oh, what if I do this for a bit?
Yeah. It a live chat is now demanding an immediate release of the Beastie Boys. We will return to it.
I think we should release I don't know, a cut up version of it.
Yeah.
I think it'll be all right on the night of everything that's been made in people's front rooms. Something I'm quite happy to volunteer my Nordenish qualities to segue between our various different eras.
In this clip, keep an eye on the robot.
Well, we've run out of time, so we're gonna. I have to say that normally we wouldn't have run out of time by now, but you never know how long jazz is going to last. So there's a possibility we're going to be trapped with jazz till midday on Friday, and this is so Marcus as well. Your Jazz FM show is still on as well.
Yes, yeah. On Saturday nights at 9 o'clock, I've got a show called Family Trees, and it's really, really fun. It just takes a simple thing that lots of the musicians who played as sidemen, for example, for Miles Davis on Kind of Blue, were all complete artists in their own right. So I then take one of them and see who played for them, and take one of them and see who played for them, and try and link it all back in a big circle back to the original artist. So this week we started with Blossom Dearie last week, which was great. It was a real adventure. And then this week it's Dr. John. So I've got some Professor Longhair in there and all sorts of cool stuff. Yeah, it's really fun. I love that.
And Rachel, things like the MASH report is still going out now, isn't it? Is that so?
Yeah. So it will be coming out Friday.
That's today.
Is it Friday today? No, it's
not. It's Thursday. And he failed the test. Another morning where he failed the test.
So, I wouldn't ask
you. And I said that with such patronising confidence as well. That's today.
Yeah. The next episode it will be tomorrow night at 10 on BBC Two, the MASH report.
And how have you been finding filming it in the way that you have to film it at the moment?
How's that been?
Quite hard, actually. One good thing about it is we've learned a lot of, and I say we because Marcus has had to help. He literally he built this cushion duvet den around for the sake of sound.
That was for the MASH report.
So I've learned a lot about sort of technical recording things, but it is really doing your own hair and makeup to telly standard takes
about. That's brutal.
It's brutal. It takes 2 hours, and that's before you've set up the studio. So they've sent lights to set up.
That's so dull to have to do when it is not something that is your passion. Makeup artists are brilliant at it, and it's a creative thing they do. When you're trying to do it in order to get to your creative thing, that's unbearable.
It's just a sort of basic level thing you have to achieve before you start performing. Oh my god, it made me so grateful for obviously in live comedy that's one thing, but the auto cue in the live things is such a gift, and trying to learn your script very last minute that you've been writing until with the writers collaborating until the last minute, and so it's been a real learning curve. And I think it's been really interesting, the MASH report. Some people saying they prefer it, but I've
been enjoying it a lot. I like the studio. Oh, sorry, I joined him. There is something about it that feels quite, I don't know, quite exciting.
I think editorially, what people have said is they're off the leash because they're not just going on what the audience laughs at. And so I think perhaps more subversive stuff, certainly if niches, gets through a little bit more.
Same on Question Time.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, really, without, there are interesting things that have come out of it, and one of the things is that without a baying mob there, or without people talking in such a way that they'll force a round of applause, that actually there's it worked, nice one. But yeah, it makes it different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right, we're going to end on some jazz and also plug the WWOZ New Orleans. Go and find out about that. OZ. The OZ, no OZ. It's OZ if you're in America. It's OZ because we're not. We're predominantly talking to a British audience. We're not as international as you sometimes think, Josie. Despite our vaunting ambition, so we're going to end on Steve. Look up also about the stuff that is going on, because as we mentioned before last week as well, in New Orleans there's a lot of crowdfunding going on because people have been hit there particularly hard as well. So find out about that. Also look below this page at the tip jar. If you have £1, we'll have it. I mean, not if it's your last one though. If it's your third one, we'll have it. And
it's about like 1,000th one or something.
That's the difference between you and I.
Not third. Third is the difference between. Anyway, okay.
Yeah. It was. I don't really mean, by the way, if you only had £3 left. Josie's taken me far too literally there. It's a disaster. I wish she hadn't read that Communist Manifesto. And now she's doing Animal Farm. Tomorrow, by the way,
do you know what that reminds me of? The joke in that film Missing, where it goes, in communism, if you have 2 houses, one of them will give to the people, hooray! If you have 2 cars, one will give to the people, hooray! If you have 2 chickens, one will give to the people, boo! Why are you booing? I have 2 chickens.
Tomorrow we're back with Richard Wiseman and Agya Paragwal, who's written a really really good book called Sway, which is all about unconscious bias. And Richard, of course, also, if you have any questions about psychology, Richard will answer those. And he also shows his latest pop-up books, as that's been his isolation venture that he's been up to, and then find out the other things are on. Josie will be doing a Quarantine Comedy Club, and we have more Sunday science shows.
May I?
We have, yes, you may.
7 p.m. I'm streaming my show Tender. It's lasts about 2 hours. I take an interval in the middle. I'm doing it live because I was supposed to be touring it at the moment, and I want to keep it in my mind, and I miss it. It's on twitch.tv/Josie_Long, or on this. My old eBay account used to be Josie_Love. That's why I got confused there. If anyone wants to buy something off me in 2004, Josie_Long, twitch.tv. If you want to come on, I'd love it.
If we're doing a little plug, can I just quickly plug my podcast, House Music?
Yes.
Yeah, make music in your house and learn about music.
And also on music tomorrow, as well as the other guests I've mentioned, we have Uncle Frank from Fun Loving Criminals with some music as well. Here is Steve's Jazz. Bye bye.